This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and is not medical or legal advice. Always follow your local policies, procedures, and protocols when functioning in your respective profession. Additionally, the views expressed by the speakers and owners of this podcast are their own and do not represent the views of their respective employers. Listener discretion is advised.
Alert Medic 1 response.
Ken, Josh, and Mustafa here. Welcome back to the Alert Medic 1 podcast.
All right, well, we're recording, and we sort of have one half of a celebrity here today, right? Or one of two celebrities here today. Aaron, you want to introduce yourself, buddy?
Yeah, I'm Aaron, as you guys have so eloquently stated. I'm one half of the, I guess I'm one of the hosts of the Pragmatic Paramedics podcast, and also half of PragMed Instagram.us now, only for just the way it looks. But anyway, yeah, that's me. I'm a paramedic here in Indiana now, solely for the past 10 years I've been here. Before that, I worked in both North Carolina, and then I actually went to school in Virginia, and that's where I got my paramedic certification initially. I've done ground 911, some critical care flight, I guess you could call it search and rescue, disaster response, and a little bit of community paramedicine for a couple of years.
Cool.
Now,
well, thanks for coming on the show, bud.
Yeah, man. Thanks for asking me. You know, we don't get asked very often to come on shows, so it's always kind of a nice. It's nice to not have to be the host.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And we love like talking to different people from, especially from now, like, you know, different parts of the country. So it's super cool. And yeah, we appreciate you coming on. We got a couple cool topics to talk about today. And honestly, Aaron, I'll let you do the grab bag and pick first. I mean, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about like situational awareness, body cams, and de-escalation. I definitely want to talk about de-escalation, but before that, I mean, Josh had mentioned that not a lot of people have mentioned EMS body cams. So I'll throw the question to you right off the bat, buddy. What are your thoughts on EMS body cams?
I am pro body cam at this point in my career, for a lot of reasons. I think I like to use the idea of CQI as being a good reason to have them, which is really a kind of a non-biased way of looking at it, right? If for nothing else, it could help improve the quality of care that we provide on the street. It certainly gives providers an opportunity to look at what they did or could have done differently, both clinically and I think just, you know, engaging with the people that we are serving within the community. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely.
For the CQI, I see it as a great benefit. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of aversion to that because there's this natural fear of getting in trouble when we make a mistake. And I can see that. And I really don't have a good argument against that because I can't say what a department would do with the information. But we do know that there are ways of making that data safe and used for the intended purpose. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I mean, it's not like it's some new, you know, cameras aren't new and storage of information isn't new. HIPAA's not new. It's probably older than most of the people that are practicing on the streets, right? Like, been around for a minute. None of this stuff is new. And they've been, you know, if you look at police specifically, you don't see a lot of like trash coming out about them, right? It's either they did it or they didn't, and that's what the camera kind of does. It gives you so I know that there are safe ways to implement it. It's a matter of who's implementing it, how much money they have, and those kind of things. We really can't. That's nitpicking. We can only recommend probably best practice, if that makes sense. we can't make sure the implementation of that rollout is perfect in every situation, specifically because we are a fractured healthcare system. And furthermore, EMS is probably more fractured. And then without any kind of standard, anything goes. And there's no saying what people would want to use it for. So I'm completely empathetic and sympathetic to the fear, to the concern of it becoming a punitive thing. But I just don't think a person with good moral intent and using good clinical knowledge that another provider or a lot of other providers would ever be misconstrued. It just doesn't make sense to misconstrue that. And so the people I tend to think who are most fearful are either, this is not a bad word, ignorant about body cams, or they're bad providers. And there's probably some gray. There's probably some gray in there. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you're either one, probably, or the other, or you're more open to the idea, especially if you have, if you have practiced good, good medicine, which includes treating people respectfully, and not throwing people out of your ambulance or kicking people for no reason. Those things, yes, you're going to be. I mean, there's no way you can't misconstrue that. So yeah, I'm pro body cams for those two big reasons. I don't think I'm going to like it, the initial rollout. I think it's going to be annoying. I think there's going to be a lot of things that I hate about it, but I also hated electronic PCRs, like that was annoying at first, but now can you imagine having to write your narratives with your hands? And I mean, and the amount of information we can put in a PCR now probably has changed medicine, or at least pre-hospital medicine, because we can see things. So, I mean, change sucks, but it can be good.
I'd like to create a new level of certification and call it the EMTS, which is the EMT scribe, and all they do is follow me around and write everything. That's what I want. But no, Ken, you were going to say something.
I had a dream about that last night, dude. I'm not lying. I really did.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Aaron on a lot of what he said. I would actually add to it with my experience as a supervisor in a busy urban environment. One of the things I dealt with literally every day was complaints from citizens, usually demeanor complaints, who made sometimes very outlandish accusations against our paramedics and EMTs. And it always came down to he said, she said. We never knew the truth. And then to add to that another level, I've also had clinicians assaulted, sometimes severely, and I've actually had instances where we had difficulty getting the police to press charges because they weren't there, they didn't see it, and again, it was he said, she said. And body cams solve all of those problems, just the fact that you have them. I don't think there's anything to be scared of in terms of patient privacy or anything like that. I mean, there's cameras in the hallways of the hospital and stuff like that. Is there a concern for some kind of data breach and information getting out? Always, right? Like that's always going to be a possibility. The jurisdiction I worked for had a pretty infamous data breach, not a data breach, but a hack, where there was an issue. Like it can happen. But I think the risk of that is minor compared to the benefits that we can see from both the patient care and the clinician safety and credibility standpoint. We're just in an era now where public safety is under a microscope. And I think we need every tool in our toolbox in order to, protect ourselves. And I was told today that I like the word toolbox. I never knew that, but I just noticed I used it. So.
Ken, you bring up a good point, and Aaron, there's some stuff I want to, echo what you were saying, but Ken, the protection for the provider, both in accusations by a patient or by a bystander, witness, anything like that, it definitely protects us in that. I've also seen some talk, because there is some articles, and there are a handful of agencies doing this already in EMS, but they also found that people are less likely to engage in combative, assaultive, just mean behavior to the providers if they know they're being recorded, because they just see that as a deterrent from escalating themselves into doing something, or whatever it is, and it protects you as this silent kind of guardian of, because it's all on camera, and it would be great to be able to pull that footage when there is an assault and understand what exactly happened. Because for example, when I got bit back in December, there is a part of it that I cannot exactly remember how my arm ended up in front of his face. And I would like to be able to see, like, okay, so I can avoid that happening again, and also in turn, so that if there was an investigation following it, they have the evidence, because there was no one there, and there might have been an outdoor camera at the location that we were, but there was no body cam. Police weren't there yet. It was me and 2 other providers. So it would be great to have that. And Aaron, something to echo with what you were saying, the CQI portion. I know that is like everyone's hugest fear with body cams. They're like, well, QA, QI, they're going to take every call and they're going to watch all of our runs, and they're going to start calling us and say, well, you should have done this way, and you should have talked to the patient this way, or you didn't notice that on the monitor for a blip you had a run of VTAC while you're looking at the patient's arm for an IV, because your camera caught it, but why didn't you catch it? Or you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And I think that is a gross overstatement of what it would be used for. I think it would be better for those really niche calls that, like, we can't get a good story of what happened, or an egregious error is reported, or something is missing in the report, and we can go back and look at the body cam and be like, okay, so what exactly happened? Like, what was this this encounter like? And then on the flip side, we can take that stuff, and the good calls, we can look at them, we can review them, and then we can be like, okay, what are these providers doing well? Like, we can pull some like actual training stuff out of it, like where we sit in paramedic class and we tell people how we interact with patients and how we should do this. And, well, why don't we properly pull this footage, blur out the involved parties, and show them, this is how you should talk to a patient, this is how you should do this procedure, this is how you should handle these scenes, instead of just talking about it, maybe forgetting the details of our own quote unquote war stories. We have documented evidence. We're already kind of doing it in our paramedic class, where our primary is our process owner for video innovation. So almost daily, he, at the end of class, pulls up 1 or 2 videos that he has picked up through the week, and says, okay, watch this. Look how we advanced. Here's the anatomy. This is how this was done. Oh, look, here's a problem. Here's how they troubleshooted it. Or here's a failed airway attempt, and this is why it was failed. So, like, we're actually giving real world and examples instead of just talking through a mannequin.
Right.
So I think it would have a lot of benefits that people don't quite realize.
Just to add, because I think there's this fear that the camera is going to catch something that was wrong, and whatever it catches is wrong, and that's inherently a negative thing. What the camera catches is extremely objective. There's no subjectivity with the camera. People are like, well, yeah, there is, because of the perspective, where you're standing. That's the whole point. It's a different perspective. It's not the whole encompassing story. It provides context, unbiased context, because it's putting a thing. And, if you miss, like you said, if you miss something because you're doing something else, that's just room for constructive growth. That's just growth. I mean, you can go, okay, yeah, you know what? I did do a bad job of timing that IV. I should have timed the IV, whatever. I should have utilized my partner. There could have been a better alarm. Who knows? But the point is, the camera is very, very, very objective. It's just a camera. It's not going to pick and choose the good and the bad. It's going to pick all of it up, and it's going to put all of that information there at someone's fingertips. And then that's my second part, is you don't really think, like, CQI guys now, girls, guys, women, men, there's a lot of information already. Like, it's super hard if you're reading, 60, 70, 80 charts a shift, to be able to be extremely effective, and that would take forever, right? Well, you really think somebody's going to watch 45 minutes straight of your encounter with the patient? No, they're looking for very specific things, and you're probably able to. I think you can almost, how when you're on the monitor, you can timestamp. You can timestamp with the body cam too, so it flags it so that the person viewing it will recognize this has been flagged for this person to want me to look at, and they can look at that. Where that's the point, that could be, something that, this is where I thought my de-escalation technique sucked, or this is where I think I did a really good job. I'm not really sure what happened here. Could you provide me with some insight? And they're like, yeah, don't use words like "you're an idiot" and then expect for, what I'm saying? Like it's helpful, because you may not think what you're saying is stupid, but you're also a human being, and the way you process information is completely different than what a camera processes, and then someone else can look at and, kind of give an objective view of what happened, which is what we're, referring to. But that works for legal, CQI, it works for everything. But customer complaints, yeah, you spit on him first. That's why he reacted the way he did.
Yeah,
you can't spit on the provider.
I know some of the agencies that are using them. I can't think. I should have had the article up right now, but there is an agency that, along with their rollout, they did some kind of like self-reporting QA, where you go back and look at your own body cam, and if you notice something that you did wrong, you're empowered to report it to the QA office, and then it's a teachable moment. It's not, unless it's like something like super egregious, which is probably going to be more involved than just your own self QA, that you can be like, hey, look, yeah, I messed up on maybe this preparation for the airway, or just something. I insert a bunch of examples, I'm sure there are, but that you can report and it be a teachable moment instead of some kind of punitive like measure or response from QA, which by the way, QI should never be punitive. That should be handled at a supervisory level. But it's one of the techniques you can use with the body cams is the self QA. And real quick, I think with the storage, I know that's a hot topic. I'll say this: if the police have figured out how to store their body cam footage all across the United States, and we haven't heard of massive data breaches, because let's be honest, they have the same kind of HIPAA esque issues that people all bring up that are going on in their body cams, because they deal with our patients, they deal with investigations. If we're not having huge data breaches of those servers, I think ours are going to be okay.
And in some cases, right, Moose, they'll come to your station to download their video, right?
No comment.
So I think Aaron and Josh, I think you both hit on or alluded to something that's really important, which is that I think people are afraid, for lack of a better term, to turn that lens on themselves and be put under a microscope, and then have their potential less than ideal actions be revealed. I think that sort of constructive criticism is not always received very well. Some people don't. Obviously, we should all take constructive criticism. It's going to help us learn and grow as people and paramedics and EMTs and whatever else. But some people don't take that very well. And I think there's some fear there. Maybe, some people have some, we like to talk about the, what's the term? Imposter syndrome, almost, where people maybe feel like they're not good enough to be the paramedic that they're alleged to be. And they're worried that's going to get caught on camera. And maybe that's part of the reservation that some people have about body cams. And they may say, well, it's because of patient privacy. It's because of data breaches. It's because of whatever else. But maybe there are some internal mechanisms going on with a lot of people where they have this underlying fear that I'm going to be exposed as a fraud.
When you guys get QA'd on, like, if you did or did not call in a STEMI or stroke alert, like, They're like, oh, this is clearly a STEMI. How come you didn't call it in? Do they say those kind of things to you? Like, you missed this STEMI, or why didn't you say STEMI on the radio?
Nobody here misses STEMIs, sir. No, I'm kidding.
That would be sweet. I guess the point is, do you like listening to that when you have to listen to your own report? You sound like a joker. It's the same thing as a camera, like everybody looks at their own pictures like, dude, I look like an idiot there. Why? But everybody else thinks it's a fine picture. It's like you said, that camera is turned around or the microphone's turned on. You have to listen to yourself. You're judging everything that you do, and you're more judgmental of your own actions probably than others. And so in a way, that's a good thing, right? Like, I don't like to be judged, but it does good to know that I'm concerned about it. So at least I'm thinking, like,
it's the perfect teaching tool. It's a perfect teaching tool, Aaron. Kind of like to what you're saying. Like, if you're if you're saying stuff that's off the wall with a patient and you hear that, it's one thing to hear it from a lieutenant or a captain or a CQI officer going, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't say X, Y, or Z to a person." But it's a whole other thing when you and I'll say this from personal experience. Now that we're posting these videos on YouTube and stuff, and I'll go back and watch an episode and watch myself going, "Oh my God, that's how I'm acting on camera," and that's just a podcast, right? But when you put that in the context of a patient care encounter, I think there's 50 shades of gray with this, right? So there are the folks that hate the idea of being videotaped because they know that the way they're doing this is 1,000% the wrong way to go about business, and they know that they could jeopardize their jobs with the way that they handle folks. And at the complete other end of the spectrum, with their best intentions, there's folks that jeopardize their jobs by trying to do the right thing with a patient and maybe making a joke to break the ice that's way off base and way off color, but it gets the job done, right? And in the middle, I think is kind of where we've been living with this conversation of folks that are, maybe there's some learning points with the way that we're talking to folks. Maybe there's some learning points with the way that we are approaching these patients. So my question is, so I say all that to say to this, my question is from a QA, quality assurance or quality improvement perspective, how much more context do we get from a video than from a well-written patient care report? What do you guys think?
I mean,
a ton more.
Pictures worth 1,000 words, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, that seems super cliche to say, but it really, I mean, I hate to say it's a fact, but there's probably something.
It's a loaded question.
But you know what I mean? Like, realistically speaking, if you have to watch yourself, that body cam is positioned in such a way that you're the one providing for, patient care or wherever you're at. It's a first person view. Like, it's you. Mm-hmm. It can hear you. It's you. I mean, yeah, it's superior to any narrative. I mean, narratives are as good as the person writing them and the experience they had. I think they can be misconstrued very easily, good, bad, and indifferent.
Agreed.
The body cam can catch. So I guarantee all of us here right now don't write every single word that the patient says to us.
Can't remember.
It literally, I mean, there's some that say none. There's some that say novels in the 15 minutes we encounter them.
Sometimes it's curse words, Josh. Sometimes it's curse words. We can't put that in the report.
Yeah. Well, if you put if you put it in quotations, then. So, but we don't say everything, and then in turn, 30 minutes down the road, we're typing our report, and we've talked to the patient a couple times. We talked to our partner. We talked to the charge nurse. We talked to the nurse handing off. Maybe we talked to a doc. Hey, we saw our buddy at the hospital. We talked to him about the call, or hey, talked about something. And by the time I get to my report, I may have forgotten like the exact wording or maybe something specific that the patient said, and I don't include everything that they said. But guess what? The body camera caught the entire conversation. So one, it protects us in that like we had that conversation, we did the assessment, we did ask the questions, and in turn, like if we really want to, let's go back, let's look at what was said, and if there was very specific things that need to be included in the report, then we write it in. It's an adjunct to a well-written report. I know, Aaron, you were kind of connotating that maybe the body cam takes the place of the report. I think they're an adjunct of each other. You know, like I know in the police they don't use the body cam as the sole report; they still do a handwritten report.
Oh, yeah. You
So,
mean
like,
on Instagram, or like during
what
this
was that?
conversation? I meant
I
like
thought you were saying it earlier, but I know it came up in Instagram too.
Yeah, what
like,
if we could use AI to take the
That's what it was.
footage from your body cam and just write the report, and then you never have to write a report again.
So, you
I'll
know, I
never
was
complain about
initially
body cams
averse
again.
to that idea, but then I watched something. I don't know what I watched, like a murder thing, and essentially what she was saying, this expert criminal psychologist or something, she was saying the problem that people have is the difference between the camera and the human. So like eyewitnesses accounts, like you remember growing up, like, oh shit, it's an eyewitness account, like this person must be guilty. And for years, decades, that was literally like the way that we pursued criminals. If somebody said they saw you do it, if there was a murder, you're fucked. Sorry if that you guys aren't allowed to cuss on this, but
Nah,
you know
we're
what I
good.
mean? Like,
No, Cody curses all the time.
but they do neuroscientists, you know, all these guys that are super smart, Huberman and all them. There's people that say that you say, first off, your eyes are not the camera. Your eyes are like the lens to the camera, and your brain's the camera. And the human brain filters out information that it doesn't need. It's an efficient tool to get a job done. And so if you're standing on scene and there's 30 things going on around you, I promise you missed more than you think you missed. And I'm not saying that to make the chart writing easier, but it goes all the way back to everything. You know, that information can be used for the physician, you know, at the hospital to get a better idea of what's going on in the house. Health department can use it. It's a super tool. And I don't know why. I mean, I do know why there's so much pushback. But I don't know why it's so hard for people to grasp. That's the part that is, you can argue this for hours and you'll just get nowhere with people.
I have a reason why, though, because it sounds like most of us have had the benefit of working in at least decently positive QA systems and also decently positive cultures. But we've had plenty of guests on this podcast that have told us nightmares. And the thing with the reservation that I have, it's not a reservation, it's a qualifier. There has to be just culture in the system before we introduce these tools in, because you know that as soon as they don't like you, somebody's going to be watching every single video and scrutinizing every little thing. And honestly, if I was in a system where that was the culture, then hell yeah, I'm against body cams, because I know my life's already hard. I don't need it to be any harder. The other thing I would say is, and again, I think from what you guys, I haven't really said my opinion on body cams yet. I think I'm agnostic to positive, right, on body cams. But what I would say is during the implementation, let's make sure our hospital partners are totally on board, and we have a good conversation on how their policies will interact with our policies, and if we're turning off turning off cameras when we're walking in, or whatever the case may be. Because Ken, you're absolutely right. There's security cameras, all that good stuff, but there's a different mindset when someone sees a body camera versus when you're not thinking of a security camera. When someone sees a camera walking into their emergency department and they're the receiving nurse and they're not used to it, or maybe they just don't like it, then we go into a whole other thing. The other thing that I was thinking of, and to be clear, I'm not against body cams. What I'm just thinking out loud here. I've had plenty of patients who I imagine, if the first part would be, I think we'd have to say everything you're going to do is being recorded. I think because at least around where I've been, every time a cop shows up, they have to tell me, or they have to tell people, hey, everything here is being recorded. That in turn, I don't want anyone to be against saying anything medically relevant that otherwise they would have said if they weren't being recorded. I know it's a maybe, but I'm just thinking out loud here. So I know that was a lot. I want to get your guys' thoughts on that.
That was the point I was just that you brought up to me. So yes, as recently as yesterday, I was on a cardiac arrest where law enforcement was first responder to it, and we're doing stuff and doing the business, and we were kind of going through our thing. And you know how sometimes you have that banter back and forth with a partner. It's innocent as far as we're concerned, and we're saying this and that and the other thing, and if within earshot of a family member, it could get you hosed in the worst way. And the officer on scene said, "Hey, just so everybody knows, everything that you say and do is being recorded visually and audible, whatever, or audio is being recorded." And it kind of like snapped me back into, all right, buddy, lock it in, dial it in. This is not the time for all that nonsense. So kind of to go along with you, Moose, I'm a fan. I mean, if it takes away me having to write a narrative for a report, man, sign me up tomorrow to put a camera on my body, and I'll just deal with all the nonsense curse words that I have to deal with later. But in those, if it makes my organization and the people in my organization behave in a more aware, situationally aware, and professional manner, bolt it to our chest tomorrow.
Yeah, take one of my eyes. No, I'm kidding, but I'm with you. Hey, I do want to. Any last comments on this? I do want to get to de-escalation at least before we go to. Well, I do want to go to this de-escalation before we finish. So, Ken, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to say, just to kind of roll back to the QA portion of this, I think it's really super important because we do a very poor job of this in QA. That if you're working in a system with body cameras, that this footage is also being used to showcase positives, and that positive reinforcement is being done. Because the minute that this becomes something where it's just smacking you with the footage every time you do something silly, it's just gonna, morale's gonna implode, right? But if we use this as, hey, paramedic Josh, paramedic Cody, paramedic Moose, paramedic Aaron, they had this call last week, and look what an amazing job they did managing this scene. It was chaos. They walked in and they saved the day. That's the kind of thing that you're going to get buy-in for body cammers from.
I was going to complain that I was feeling targeted. I was going to complain that I was feeling targeted until that last part. Ken brought it home.
So that was my last piece.
Can we get Ken? We also have to have a policy for a year-end montage with like some good music. No, go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead, bud.
I was just going to say that. So the thing I think a lot of people don't think about with body cams is they are not always recording. We don't have batteries large enough, so they're usually recording when you engage them. You have to prompt the thing to go. So
unless you're the Baltimore City Gun Trace Task Force, then they just randomly go on for when you're planning.
I mean, again, like you said though, like it's really dependent. Like in an organization that's considered a quality organization with people that are doing this job because they want to do this job, not because they have to do this job, you're going to have good implementation and rollout. But to the departments that suck, they're the departments that are sucking, and they're just gonna suck, and they either are going to get done away with one way, or we're just going to have to continue making good EMS, decisions where we can. You can't control everything, unfortunately.
Aaron, I'm glad you put it that way. So for the last 2.5 years, we've been using the same body cameras that law enforcement uses in our clinical challenges, and also have been using like the Oakley camera, like the Universal Soldier type shit, in all our clinical challenges for the last few years, for that purpose of somebody wants to challenge the score that they were given during a simulation, or challenge like, no, I think we did a lot better. No, I think we made this amount of points, and you let them watch the video, and it tells a little bit of a different story for them. In which case, generally, so it's kind of to everybody's point about complaints and things like that coming about what you did, man. When they see how they were doing things, those complaints tend to die, and the discrepancies between what I think, how well I think I did, versus watching it under no duress, no stress filters, no cognitive duress or anything like that. And I'm watching this tomorrow, and seeing just how poorly I did. It tends to take a lot of the wind out of a complaint. Just from my personal experience with these kinds of cameras.
That's very fair. All right. Only because we're kind of on a time crunch. Let's shift gears here. Aaron, you made a post the other day, or one of you guys did, about.
I do it. Jason is almost solely the man behind the camera on the podcast stuff.
Oh, gotcha. Cool. So
if you're talking to somebody on Instagram, you are talking to me.
That's how. So to be clear, if you're talking to someone on Instagram, you're talking to Josh. If you're talking to our Instagram, so no, that's fair. That's fair. You mentioned something about what de-escalation training people had received, correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
Do you want to go through some of those answers, and then I can bring up my bit that I wanted to talk about?
Yeah. So I think the biggest response was this verbal judo. A lot of people had taken verbal judo. There were a few people that took some form of crisis intervention training. To be fair, I know there's I've taken part in the crisis intervention training that's typically given to police. But when the people were telling me, I'm not sure if we were all talking about the same one. So that one, and then the other two that I'm aware of are Evade, which is a more hospital-focused one. They do have other disciplines that they look at, and then DT for EMS is the other one.
Yeah, we had a previous episode. I want to say with Josh. Was it me, you, and Jasmine? Right, when we talked about how
it was the three. It was the original, just me, you, and Ken, and Jasmine.
Okay. Yeah, was it the mental health episode? Maybe, I don't know. I can't remember. Yeah. But we talked about I never received no de-escalation training.
I brought up that been doing this for 17 years and I've never gone through a formal course. I've been through basic training, AIT, EMT twice, paramedic school, the fire academy, and never once have we touched on a single thing related to a de-escalation technique, tactic, class, lecture. Nothing.
Do you have people?
And also, I work for
hurt at your department.
Yeah. The guys on my shift like to comment that of all the people on the shift that gets assaulted the most, it's me. And it's honestly I'll look back on it, and most of it's not true. Hey, I could have said the right words or whatever. It was all out of nowhere. One was a tackle. One was a punch through the crowd from a post-tickle patient. And the most recent
they just don't look. They don't like how you look. That's probably
and the last one was a
post-tickle guy. It's that mustache. I've been telling you.
Last one was a post-tickle guy that bit me, and that was rolling around on the ground trying to keep him from running out in traffic.
So tell me real quickly, what were the three patients? 2 post-tictals and a what?
The other one was on PCP.
So that's the best part, right? I'm jumping ahead here, but that's the real issue, right? These mental derangements, whether the alteration in mental status is typically not someone you can de-escalate because they are. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys this, but I shouldn't have to tell any provider this. Anybody that knows about blood sugar, right? The very first thing you pretty much learn that you can have, it's like overdoses in blood sugars, right? Both of those people will fight you. And there is nothing you can do or say that's going to change them from wanting to fight you. It's just, I mean, I'm not saying that they are going to fight you. I'm just saying if they want to, what are you going to do to de-escalate? You're either going to Narcan them or you're going to give them blood sugar. That's your de-escalation tool.
And watch your partners too, right? If you need a litmus test for how true what you just said is, there is watch your partner when you're on your way to lunch and the tones hit again.
Right.
They watch just lose their fucking minds. It's just a blood sugar problem.
And Aaron, I'm so happy you brought that up, man, because I responded from my personal Instagram to your page, and because someone had said Jiu-Jitsu, right? So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I mentioned it a little bit. I'm sorry.
That was Jason Warren.
Oh,
the mindfulness
who answered that?
That was his post. That was his response.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I've connected with that. I think I've said it a little bit, talked about it a little bit on the podcast. But I joined a Gracie gym in September of 2021, and riding after that, after I'd been rolling for a bit, and riding before that is two different, things for me, because I had a few months ago, I had a sedated guy who was on meth, and we had to restrain him. And like the technique that I used, it was a version of twisting arm control, and people that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu know what that means, was great. And we were able to safely and effectively render this person so he couldn't harm himself or others, and we were able to successfully sedate him. And I remember thinking after that call, I'm like, how did I do that before? Because if you don't have that kind of training, how do people manage? And I mean, most of the time, I feel like people figure it out. The other thing that jiu-jitsu, I feel like, has given me is a mindset thing. Like, if I walk into a room because listen, to be clear, no one is going to enter a good jiu-jitsu gym and beat everyone. That's not going to happen. It's not some foo-foo thing. Even a seasoned a white belt that's got a couple, stripes on their belt, someone coming off the road is going to get demolished. It's just how it works. I didn't believe it until I did it. That translates into a certain level of, I wouldn't say confidence, but I would say safety, maybe, or just a self-assurance, maybe, that you can defend yourself. And what that does in turn is it gives you a sense of calm. You're not panicking when you're confronted with someone who's very irate, very combative, diaphoretic, screaming, naked, right? Like, it helps you learn how to be comfortable in difficult situations. So go ahead. Cody.
Key, Mustafa, is that it pulls the emotion away from it.
Yes.
You are not reacting emotionally to what's happening. You are responding to their actions in the safest and most appropriate manner.
When if you're 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week, if you're just constantly getting strangled and you're trying to strangle somebody, right? That kind of desensitizes you and teaches you how to deal with that. What's the word? Oh my God.
Well, there's a discomfort and a comfort at the same time, and you know this of. So for folks that aren't like initiated and folks that have never been in any kind of training of close interpersonal conflict or combat, and I don't want to use that terminology, but it's all I've got at this point. They're the folks that will freak out the second a patient touches them for whatever reason. And then there's the folks that have, like you were saying, Moose, I know I've been choked out before. Like I'm going to be okay. And you're like, put your hands on me. I'm fine. You are now in my workspace, and we can do things inside this workspace here. And if you're depending on what that patient who is what would you say, Moose? 95% chance that they are not going to the same, your Gracie Jiu-Jitsu gym that you're going to, and they don't know what they're doing, but you do.
I sure as hell hope not, because if they do, then I'm not that good.
So let me ask.
And they may know it, right?
I think what you guys are alluding to or inferring, maybe without direct inference here, is you're not being provocative. You're not instigating. You're trained to a point where you now understand that what I'm going to do, this whole puffing my chest out, being the aggressor, using words like, what are you going to do? Look, like you do, I do it still. Like I make stupid comments and I wish that I could take them back. But a lot of times I'm responding with emotion to said issue. It's me that I'm worried about, not the patient. If I worry about the patient, which is what I should be worried about, I'm not even going to be in a situation. I should never be in a true situation where I'm in danger, right? Mm-hmm. I should be able to have an escape plan. I should be in a position to have the advantage on the patient to where I know that I'm a far enough away distance that he's not going to just leap on me. I mean, there are obviously situations in the back of the ambulance where you're going to have to, be in a less ideal situation. But your patient should be secured to the cot at that point. And you should, again, have the advantage again. Like you should be having the advantage. My thing is, and this is the thing that's the biggest issue. And I think people with any kind of combative training, not necessarily military training, but, hand-to-hand combat, or if they've taken these courses, learns. It's do not antagonize or instigate the other person.
Yep.
Yes. That's what I was just about to say, man. Like, because you know what to do and you need to learn to be cool. Like somebody's inside of arms of your range and somebody's inside that workspace.
Right.
You need to learn to be cool with somebody maybe being a little bit aggressive inside that workspace so that you don't needlessly escalate the situation. Just know that, all right, man, it's the General Mattis of like, or it wasn't Mattis, or I forget, maybe Chesty Puller of like, hey, you know what? Be nice, but have a plan to kill everybody in the room. So once that patient or that individual, maybe they're not a patient yet, is inside your arm's reaches, you have to know, like, all right, if they grab me here, I've got a system of responses, and we all have to be trained how to use these appropriately. But if this guy grabs me, I could be cool up to this point, and then I'm going to use XYZ maneuver to distance and de-escalate, not attempt a submission maneuver, right, Moose?
Yeah. So what you're getting at is it teaches you the concept of a proportioned response, right? So just because someone's upset with you, you're not going to be like, oh, screw this guy, I'm going to snow him, right? Like it's a proportionate response. And actually, Ken, were you going to say something about? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the real key, and I think we're kind of beating around this idea, I think the most disarming thing you can do to resolve a situation is to simply be respectful and make eye contact and be civility, just try to be calm. And like Cody said, until the point where you go to put your hands on me, there is no reason at all to increase or instigate the situation. That's all I was going to say.
It goes back to what we said with our last episode with Lindsay, right? Hey, don't forget, sometimes you in the hood.
Yeah.
You are in the hood, and they don't care about your uniform. They don't care about charges. They know, depending on what, which hood or what neighborhood or wherever you're at, that individual may not give a damn about criminal charges or something like that. And in that situation, I think that's an escalation of the conversation of what we're talking about, of just somebody who's maybe not aware of themselves, doesn't have their wits about them, and maybe post-ictal, so on, and they're a little bit combative, and you can do certain things in that situation versus kind of like what you're talking about when you're in that neighborhood, and the best thing that you can do is treat everyone, not just those individuals, but treat everyone like you're a human being and they're a human being. And hey, look, you guys asked me to come here to fix a problem. So what problem do you need me to fix right now? And let's just go down that path instead of, well, I've got to be the guy in charge. I have to be the authoritarian. Everybody has to do what I say. And that's a good way to get punched straight in the face. And that's what happens. This is what happens. Your nose gets all crooked and it gets smashed in, and it's a bad day. Mm-hmm. It's a bad day every time.
Yeah, something I think that is also being kind of talked about, as well as it may have been said, honestly, but bringing the calm and not matching the energy of the patient or whoever is the loud, escalation, belligerent, obnoxious person on scene. You don't get loud to them. Just be yourself, be the calming nature that you're supposed to be. I mean, we are EMS. We're supposed to be somewhat of a calm force in the room. We're not supposed to be the one yelling and screaming and, putting people in submissive chokeholds or, trying to restrain them. That's someone else's job, but it's usually not our job. And if you come
guys with the cameras job,
and, I think of this one girl that I treated like a year ago. She was not having a good day at her apartment. I think she was getting kicked out by her mom or aunt or whoever it was. She wasn't wanting to leave. Police were called. She's yelling and screaming. She's saying things about wanting to hurt herself. And so then EMS gets involved. Okay, we get there and she's in cuffs. She's screaming at us. She's screaming at the officers. She's kicking. She's thrashing. We get her out to the unit, and she's still yelling at the officer, and she's yelling at me. And I'm just sitting there, calm. And all I did was I pulled out the narc box, and she said, "No, no, 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 no! Don't stick me." I said, "Okay, I'm not going to stick you, but we're going to have a conversation. We're going to be respectful with each other. You're not going to yell at me. You're not going to yell at the police. You're not going to yell and try and hurt yourself. You're not going to try and hurt me or him or anything like that. We have a nice, easy transport to the hospital. Guess what? We have a nice, easy transport. You don't get a needle from me. You don't get any medication. We're going to talk. We're going to, interact through this." She said, "Okay." And she said, I swear I'll do it. I'll pinky promise. And up came the pinky. I pinky promised her. And guess what? We never had a problem the entire transport. Funny coincidence. Like 2 weeks later, I go to a call, another, what we call a agitated patient call. And I show up and I just look at the patient. I say, "Hey man, let's get on my stretcher. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to stick you." And he says, "You promise? You promise? You pinky promise me?" And I laughed. I was like, "What's going on? Where's the camera?" But yeah, if you bring a calming energy to the patient, sometimes it doesn't work. They're just belligerent. They're going to want to be that way, or they're under the influence of something. But it's amazing if you don't match their energy, how willing they are to work with you and, be a rational human being for 15-20 minutes to the hospital. And hopefully that translates into the ER too.
That's the perfect tie-in to what Moose is talking about. Is the more you know about what you're capable of and how you can respond and what but whether you're training BJJ, whatever discipline you're learning, the more aware you are of yourself and your knowledge is the better. The what's the word I'm looking for? Damn it, I'm messing it up. That would have been a real good clip too. The more equipped, the more capable you are of responding appropriately to those situations instead of, being real standoffish and being super verbally aggressive, thinking that, well, I'm just going to talk to you a certain way and talk you into being compliant, and, that kind of stuff. It went better in here, guys.
There's something that's important that there's a lot of things. We're not missing anything. I think what I want to point out is something specifically to EMS is you are not, there is no law stating, at least not that I'm aware of, that you have to transport somebody against their will. I mean, in fact, I think there's a law against that, right?
It's got
so
kidnapping,
I don't know
right?
why people spend so much time fighting people who don't want to go to the hospital. Like, I'm not saying abandon your patient, but if somebody is, adamantly opposed to going to the hospital or an intervention, it's not your duty to persuade them violently to take their blood sugar. Like, who cares? If they don't want it, they don't want it. They don't want it. Why did you fight them to take their blood sugar? That's this whole concept of do no harm, right? Like, you're not benefiting them by checking their sugar when they're mad at you. And now you're forcing them to be poked. That's just not a benefit to that. Now, if their sugar's low, right, and that's the reason why you're checking their sugar, that's different. But if you're just doing this to check boxes, don't fight people over stupid things like that. It really does avoid a lot of conflict. Today, even in my practice now, if a nurse asks me to do something for them on one of the floors, and I walk into the room and the patient tells me to get the fuck out, you know what I'm doing. I'm out. I turned around and I leave. I tell the nurse I'm done. Call me back if they're willing next time, but I'm not fighting them for this. It's a lab draw. It's not life or death situation here. If it's not a life or death situation, I don't know why we're fighting people this hard.
Well, to be clear for the listeners, you're not saying don't check the blood sugar on hypoglycemic patients. What you're saying is don't be a dick and try to and force those things on people that have capacity to say no, right?
Correct.
So, and certainly what Cody and I are saying is there is I hate to keep coming back to like these military-esque terms, but like there's like rules of engagement, right? With a proportionate response. Like, so if someone has capacity, you shouldn't be throwing them into some sort of, like you shouldn't be doing that. But at the same time, you should be prepared to handle that patient that Josh was talking about that's high on PCP, or someone that's, I guarantee everyone of us have had a hypoglycemic patient that's erratic and violent, and you should have the wherewithal to know the difference.
Yeah.
Is that right, Aaron? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think I think you said it really well that we're not responding, and I don't like to talk on use of force because I'm not not a police officer, and those rules of engagement are different for me. Does that make sense? I can't speak to that. I don't really know what the real rules of use of force are because I'm not an officer and I'm not engaging people to that thing. But yeah, I think that we respond a lot of times, and I say we because I'm talking about us as an industry, respond inappropriately with inappropriate force. And so, you don't need to put on a big show for an 87-year-old, grandma who weighs 67 kilos. Um, there's not really a lot of fighting there. Just put her, you can look at her and go, this is not going to be a problem. She may end up being a problem. There's no
what do you
glory
really
in that fight
defeat.
an 87-year-old grandma. No, like you just hold her arm with one hand. You're like, it's okay, relax, kind of thing. And I think that's an appropriate level of force. But when I started in EMS, one of the things that people thought was so funny was fighting patients in the back of the ambulance. Like, oh, I rode that guy all the way into the hospital. I'm like, you really think that's funny or cool? There's nothing cool about that. If you're fighting your patients, you fucked up a long time ago. I don't know,
Man. I was just about to say that, Aaron, of like, even though we're talking about, somebody being too close to you and they're out of sorts and whatnot, like at what point did we screw up and find ourselves in the wrong situation? Did we lose our situational awareness, or did we even gain the proper situational awareness to begin with to know that maybe this is more of a law enforcement needs to be, the point guy on this a little bit, and maybe we should be in the background. I mean, and I will say this as an EMT or a paramedic, a firefighter, whatever, you should not be the primary person doing for de-escalation maneuvers, or for, hey, get on the stretcher or else. You should back off, back out, and call for, guess what, law enforcement, the people that are trained to handle these situations and have the little cameras nowadays that can keep you that are better suited for that job. The same thing could be said of them in a different context, right? So why? Never mind. I'll skip that. We'll strike that from the record. The jury is to ignore.
Can we try to
say.
apply these things to something though? Like I'm sorry, the furnace started, so I have to get closer and louder. This Rochester, New York thing, you guys see that in the news for the EMT? Presumably there's an EMT and a paramedic. I don't know if it's two EMTs or two medics, but you know how the media likes to call everybody one or the other. They were AMR employees, and they were transporting, I believe, a 911 patient to the hospital when the patient, at some point during patient care, became aggressive. And that's air quotes right there. So became aggressive, put his hands on her, wanted either the EMT or the paramedic, and they then stopped the ambulance, called police, and had PD remove the patient from the ambulance. Long story short, this guy dies a couple weeks later. Probably had nothing to do with them per se.
Yeah.
So
I heard about this one.
At what point did they fuck up that run, right? Like, it's just hard to believe that this patient was, like...
It's a misunderstanding of what we are charged to endure, right? If somebody's being that sideways with it, and our guidance from the day that we're, from day one of training, maybe day 4, but from our initial entry training is, hey, when things are getting out of hand, get somebody else that knows how to handle that situation involved, with your patients and your safety in the best at tippity top best interest at heart. I still think I think you make the right decision. If the cat dies 3 weeks later from a brain bleed that you didn't catch, well, sometimes these things happen. I didn't mean to cut you off though, Aaron. I was
No. I just think that it's like a pendulum, and we find ourselves either responding to aggression too, like it's almost too knee jerk, and we do things like they did with the Elijah McClain, right? These guys go in there full force, whatever they saw, I don't care. They did what they did, right? And then you get people like this Rochester, New York thing, where instead of even dealing with the conflict, they stop the bus and they call police and they boot this guy from the ambulance. Which I don't know about you. I don't care what kind of I mean, unless he was beating, like spitting, I'm not stopping the ambulance because he grabbed my shoulder for oxygen. Like, I'm going to give him oxygen. That's me. That's my personal way, right? Like, I'm big enough to where I'm not really that concerned about this guy hurting me, especially a winded guy who's short of breath. Like, what's he going to do? He's going to eventually succumb to his shortness of breath. So there's this pendulum. And I think the thing that we need to be teaching people about de-escalation, and this is in the definition, it's a gradual process, right? And you are going to get some good out of it, and you may not get the full effectiveness from it. It's kind of like when you give nitro. You're expecting a certain response, and you may get a response from 1 to 10. And, when you're de-escalating somebody, you have to be patient. You have to be present. You have to be listening to what they're saying. You cannot be commanding and telling them what they have to do. You have to be open to dialogue and recognize that if at first you don't succeed, try again, kind of thing. The best case for any of these things is that nobody has to go hands-on. That's the best case. Worst case is you have to go hands-on, right? Like, your goal, I think, should be, I don't have to hurt this person and they don't have to hurt me to get them on the ambulance. Or we're in the ambulance and we're treating them.
So I got to ask something. So I just Googled the thing, Rochester, New York. So basically, the guy passed away a month later, right? That's the story you're talking about. And
I can't remember how long it was, but it was substantial enough.
Yeah, so I don't know the details about this. Like I said, I just learned about it when you guys said it. But one thing that kind of not alarms me, but takes me aback a bit is there's a line in the article that says one of the ambulance crew members is heard telling officers that the man grabbed her and would not let go. Right? So I'm not sure I agree with you guys that it's the wrong thing to do here to stop. If like especially someone who's, I don't know anything about this woman, but it said her in the thing, right? I think there's a lot of other factors that go into this, and generally, if people have gone violent with me, I kind of just deal with it and then tell dispatch, "Hey, have security ready," right? But at the same time, I'm 5'11" and like a little like south of 280, right? So I'm good, but I'm not sure if someone's like 5'0", 110 pounds. That I think the right call might be to stop.
No, I don't think I was insinuating that they shouldn't have stopped in.
Oh, gotcha. I must have misunderstood you. Okay.
I don't think that there's any problem with making the scene safe. If we have to go all the way back to EMT school to talk about that, we should, because the scene is literally the being safe is a dynamic thing, right? Like, I've had this conversation 500 million times. The scene doesn't just become safe at the beginning and stay safe throughout. I mean, it changes every single thing that you do from the moment you step into the house to the minute that there's a medic who lost his fucking eye in the emergency room, breaking up a fight between a patient and another care provider. It wasn't even his patient. He just stepped in and saw this happening, and he got blasted, and the guy gouged his eye out. So, it may not even be your patient. And that's where situational awareness comes into it. But if the scene becomes unsafe, then yes, you should make every attempt to escape or flee or save yourself, right? We're number one priority. So I did not mean to imply that you shouldn't make the scene safe. What I'm saying is
I apologize. I must have misunderstood you then.
Yeah, no, what I'm suggesting is we need to be better at figuring out before the ride if this is going to be a problem. Why did you leave the scene? Okay, he was probably hypoxic, and he probably needed oxygen or something to help him be not hypoxic, right? So you're telling me from the time that you got into the ambulance when he grabbed you and asked you for oxygen that you were like, okay, we can go now. At what point did you decide the scene was unsafe? I think that's where I'm going. Their call was bad on part of their lack of, um, I don't know, awareness.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. Sorry.
Yeah. That case is, I think it highlights something else of, what caused him to get that way. Because, from the sounds of it, it was like a 0 to 100 thing. Like everything was fine, then everything was not fine. And I think one of the highlights to take away from it is that they ended up refusing transport of him. They kicked him out of the ambulance, had him go to the sidewalk, and then he dropped again. And that's when police called for a second transport unit to transport him. So,
Oh yeah, that's not cool.
yeah. So if we go back to the original incident, it's like, okay, understanding like distancing ourselves from the patient or putting ourselves in a position to be able to talk to them and not be face to face and be in a heated moment, get the police there and have them as even a quote unquote just physical de-escalation barrier, something be like, hey, we have someone else here, it's recorded, before we start making decisions to not transport someone based off of the interaction. um, I think all of us have probably had patients like this that got wily, a 0 to 100 moment, but I don't think any of us kicked them out of our ambulance and we told them, no, we're not transporting you. Have we all had probably the patient that got up, unbuckled the belts, we pulled over to the side of the road, and they literally walked out of the back of the ambulance and off they went on their merry day? Yeah, we've all had that too. But they made that decision, and it's not us saying we're not taking you.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it's
Yeah,
important to understand, not only understand how to do it yourself, but to get people involved to make the transport safe in the first place.
it says in this article from a week ago, according to Mayor Malik Evans, the man was asked to get out of the ambulance and wait on the side of the street for another ambulance to arrive to take him to the hospital. Okay, I did not know that. I thought I thought the dude was like fighting him or whatever, and then like he removed himself from the ambulance. I did not understand. Yeah. That was my initial understanding just from hearing about it while we were recording. But the more I read about it, I'm like, damn, I'm not.
There's certainly a difference between a patient being mouthy with you and a person being mouthy with you and a person giving you the business and whatnot. And in which case, I would, for whatever reason, whatever they've got going on, that's not, you don't kick a patient out of the ambulance for that. It's your life is truly in danger.
I'm not sure I ever kick an person out of an ambulance. It's me removing myself from the dangerous situation.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback, but I can't think of a time. Now, if a person had full capacity, right, and they're like, "Listen, I'm done. I'm like, listen, I can't keep you, right? Like, I legally cannot keep you here. So if you want to get up and leave, just sign here. Let me call the doc real quick, and then we can go from there, right?
Yeah,
and. Yeah, no, I'm going to have to read up more on this because this is.
Post-ictal patients, for me, it's kind of like Narcan, the reversal. These guys, they don't want to go, right? And so you're on this weird, what do I do here kind of situation. And it goes back to what I said initially, right? Like if they don't want to go, they don't want to go. And if I'm in the ambulance and I have a post-ictal patient who starts to become really, he's GCSing 15 now, bro, if we're driving down the interstate and he goes, let me out, I'm going to do my very best to try to get him to the most safe location. But ultimately, if I don't pull over and something happens, like he's able to get out or we fight, did I antagonize it? Did I exacerbate that situation by not just doing my due diligence?
Fair question. Fair question.
Yeah.
So,
big thing is if they have capacity, they're within their rights to refuse care.
It's the same, the Narcan. I'll go real quick. The Narcan thing, like a lot of people wait to Narcan until they're going, but I find that to be problematic for a lot of reasons, right? Like I'm not trying to give people rights per se. I'm just trying to not take their rights away. Does that make sense? The
Wait, what do you
freedom
mean
of
people?
consent.
What do you mean people wait to give Narcan?
So what you're saying is they wait to give it so that they're in the back of the unit, and then they have no choice because they're there,
Like
and
it
they're
be
like, "Well, you're
transport.
already here, so let's go."
Yeah.
So they just bag a patient for like 20 minutes on the transport, and then once they're pulling into the hospital, they give them a little bit of Narcan.
Oh, how long have you been EMS for?
Bro, I listen, dude. 10 years, I cannot see that ever going well. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I can't even think of. I mean, the major place that I work. Damn,
As
I don't
funny
know.
as the story this is, it's super
It
cliche because I
happens.
think it's the story. But yeah, we used to bag them into the hospital and then push the Narcan as we rolled up. Yep.
Why wouldn't you want to
then
do
you-
the opposite? If you get, I mean, I'm not advocating for anybody to do this, but like,
Well,
you treat them on scene, and then if they don't want to go, they don't want to go. They have capacity. Just get a refusal and leave. I don't know. That's easier to me than picking up somebody and bagging them and everything.
Yeah,
but
because
have you ever
because
paid back the? Go ahead, Aaron. Go ahead.
providers think that there's some sort of rule that's abandonment. They think that they have to transport you. Yeah, no, dude, trust me. When I moved back to Indianapolis and I left that area, I never did that again. I fucking put Narcan in every single person's veins that needed it on scene. And
I
if
guess
they
that's
stood
better.
up,
Go ahead.
and then they would stand up, and if they wanted to walk away, I would do my very best to convince them. The problem is I had a partner who was unconvincing, and so he would let them walk away. And ultimately, I was probably 50-50 for opiate overdoses until 2016 or whatever.
I guess
didn't wanna
waiting
do it.
until you get to the hospital is better than just Narcanning them and then saying no patient.
At least you get him to the hospital. We used to have the fear that if you gave them Narcan, right? If you gave them Narcan, it could wear off, and then their heroin overdose would come back, and then they would go unresponsive again. And so what you were doing was kind of not letting that second call occur. Except it very rarely happens in real life.
How
the
often
old
does that
school-
happen, though? Right?
Old school
It
mindset.
doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Isn't there like actual literature on that? Why do I think
Yeah.
that?
I think it's
There
been
was-
debunked. It's
Yep.
been debunked.
There was a point in time where
Aaron and I
people
had the same
suggest-
FTO apparently.
Yeah.
There was a point in time where they were suggesting that if you're gonna get a refusal on a opiate overdose, you give them IM Narcan before you left the scene, because it was like, oh well, it's a slow metabolism and it's going to ward off the rest of their opiate that they took. That was, I remember that. Like, I don't think I ever did it, but I remember people talking about it. Like, hey, it's an idea, so they don't re-overdose when we leave. And I will put myself out in front of you. I told patients, hey, we should go because what I gave you might wear off and your opiate might take back over, because I was uneducated on it.
Oh, I've said that before. Yeah.
Yeah, we've all done it probably at one point because we weren't educated on it.
Right.
And now we look at it and we understand it, and just like the patient that requires all the care in the beginning can end up needing none of the care and can refuse. I want to highlight the opposite, and Aaron kind of brought this up, is that there's the patient that isn't a patient at first, but develops into one. So you go for like the agitated patient or the, some kind of, in my jurisdiction, like we call it MO. People are, if they don't already know where I work, they know when I work now. And, we go there and the police are dealing with some kind of distraught individual for whatever reason. And, they're like, hey, is there any way you can get him to go to the hospital? Like, we can't transport him. He's yelling at us. He's refusing to get in the back of the car, or this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking about a very specific call. And go there. Okay. Go up to him. Sir, I'm Josh. I'm a paramedic. What's going on? This hurts. Okay, cool. You want to go to the hospital? Yep. Okay. Bring the stretcher over. Put him on the stretcher. As soon as he got on the stretcher, I don't want to go. Get me off this thing. I don't want to go to the hospital. Dropping every curse word in the world. I said, okay. I asked him the magic three or four questions. He was cognizant, able to make his own decisions. Okay, sir, you can hop off the stretcher. And the cops were like, but aren't you going to take him? I said, he can make his own decisions. I don't have to take him to the hospital. And in the end, he did become a patient when he resisted to get into the back of the cop car so hard for 20 minutes that he put himself into rhabdo. So he did become a patient in the end, but he wasn't at the time because he was able to make his own decisions. And we've actually, in agency recently put out but guidance to all the providers that a person in custody can still refuse care.
Oh yeah.
As long as they are able to make their own, they're mentally cognizant. And I had that happen as well, where a patient got in a fight with the police. He got punched in the face, and the police said, well, because he got punched, he's got to go to the hospital. And he was telling me, I don't want to go to the hospital. Uh-oh. Moose just left. Uh-oh.
Is that true until they are incarcerated, at which point they become a ward of the state?
So here's something cool. This is my experience. So I've been working for the same system, but now I'm working in the capacity as an in-hospital provider, I guess you could call it. And we're the community hospital, like the local hospital. So we get every single prisoner and in custody patient on our floors. They also refuse. They'll refuse certain treatment. Like, I don't want to do a blood draw today. They get the same basic human rights that the rest of us get. And that's kind of what a lot of these things that I've experienced over the years kind of led me down this train of thought. And I'm not fighting with the patient. If they have the ability to make an informed decision, the capacity to make an informed decision, that's a legitimate reason. Why would I fight them over that decision? I don't want anybody taking my rights. Why would I want to take theirs from them? And I think we often believe as medical providers that we know better. And we might know better clinically, but that doesn't mean that's the choice that they wanted to make. And if they don't want to make that choice, you're fighting. You're going to fight somebody that doesn't want to do something. And it's super easy to just be, I don't know what they call it, but you give choices kind of and options and alternatives to things. Whatever you can do.
Sovereignty is the word. Sovereignty.
You make accommodations. If they're gonna not want to go and your concern is that they're not oxygenated, maybe it's a treatment. Can I at least give you a treatment? We'll do it right here. We don't even have to roll, bro. I'll give you the treatment. Let me just at least look at your heart for like 5 minutes and check your blood pressure. And then if that, we can reconvene after we check that shit. And then if you still don't want to go, we'll call my doc, and the doc will tell you the same thing that I'm telling you. And then you don't have to go. Or you can go, whatever, right? You've done your due diligence. You've done exactly what you should by law. And it really de-escalates a lot more than need to be. Otherwise, you're fighting medical patients who have, legitimate issues. Like, how many times do you fight the dementia lady? She's like 86 years old, and all she wants to do is debate with you. And no matter what you do, she gaslights you in response. And you're just like, all right, you know what? Just sit there and be happy we'll get to the hospital soon enough.
I think they call that marriage, too.
Yeah. In real marriage, you stop arguing because you know everybody's boundaries. Just walk away from it.
Ken, did you have anything you wanted to add about?
Not really. I think it's an important discussion, and I really agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I don't have anything special, so I'll stop running my mouth.
Well, can I say one thing? I think having a camera for most de-escalation situations, it really is beneficial. Like this Rochester thing, think about it. We would have known. We wouldn't even have to talk about this because the camera would have said what the third person, obviously it's a he said, she said, and there's always a third what is it? There's always 3 stories or something, 3 sides.
Your side, story. My side, and the truth.
Right.
That was one of the things that was brought up when I got tackled. They're like, well, there's no footage and you didn't have a injury, so we're not even going to take this to court.
Right, which is funny because you would think as the public safety provider that it would be he said, she said, but it's not that way. And so these things like body cameras are really in place to protect the community, and you're a part of that community. But
go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
No, go, please.
Does the body camera provide enough context?
Yeah,
does it provide enough context for everything?
I think that's the question. And that's why we would recommend, and when I say we, I'm just referring to maybe PragMed and some of the guests we've had on to talk about it, is if more people have cameras, then you have more perspective, which gives you better context of what's happened on that scene. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
I think, if you have a street camera from 150 feet away, that's the only context you get. So now that context is in the hands of the jury if it's a court thing, and they get to make a decision on that. And so if you have every single person on that scene, let's just say it's 2 providers, EMS providers, the engine, so now you have 6 and 2 officers, that's a lot of freaking cameras that give you context and perspective.
I mean,
Tons of perspective. Yeah.
think about what happened in Memphis. So that's now a year and a half ago now. It feels a year. I don't know. It's definitely died down, which I'm sure it's in deliberation and everything is happening in the courts.
Yeah.
But not that I'm saying right, wrong, indifferent, whatever the providers did, because we have no perspective on what they did for a reason. There was no cameras. The only camera was a street cam that so conveniently was directly over the scene and caught a non-audio version of what was happening. But if there was body cameras involved, which unfortunately there was ones turned off, but if the EMS providers had it, now we would have their side of the story instead of us Monday morning quarterbacking this video and a litigator Monday morning quarterbacking it, and then getting the he said, she said, and everything. And like I said, I'm not defending their actions, whether it was right or wrong, because we don't know. But what would know is a body cam, and I think that's pretty important.
Are you familiar with the Springfield, Illinois case?
Oh yeah.
So the positional asphyxia one. So there was you guys probably don't know that. Maybe you do know this. I read a lot of EMS news because it's the content we make for Instagram. So I spend a lot of time kind of fishing and reading news reports. So there's an article that just came out yesterday about that case. They are requesting that the cot be examined because they're trying to prove that they didn't do it. But again, I guess the thing is there was just poor de-escalation, and we don't know what happened, right? But if we had cameras on on those providers, if they're truly not guilty, right, there would be nothing to worry about right now. We wouldn't even be having this conversation but now they're just shedding such a bad light, and I feel so bad for them if they aren't guilty. You know what I mean? If they are guilty, then 100% they need to, whatever happens to them probably should happen to them and more. But if they're innocent of this charge, the camera would have made all that go away. And I hate to be judgmental and judge books by its cover, but I can look at them and tell you they probably were both pro or anti-camera by just looking at their camera,
And if even the cameras that were there, the body cams on the police, they caught the whole interaction. That's where we're getting the information and how they interacted with that patient, and the words that they said were from the body cam of the police.
Yeah.
So we've been going for about an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know if we want to close it out. If we have any last things we want to talk about, I want to be cognizant of Aaron, your time, and your dog's possibly scratching at the door here soon.
Yeah,
I know I got to run out and grab groceries late at night.
I want to talk with everyone about the possibility of developing a jiu-jitsu program for the back of an ambulance.
I think we tried that with that Evade or DT for EMS. I don't know. A lot of the courses that I've taken have just been out of sheer coincidence. It's not like I sought them out. I just got lucky in the departments I've worked for, and they've added them. But they're really all the same, right? The premise is all the same. It's respect people's personal space, right? That's the very first thing you need. Just respect other people's personal space. You have that control. You can step back, and you can step back, and you can step back, right? Make sure that when you're engaging with somebody, that your interaction, both body language and your verbal language, is respectful. Like Ken said, right? You just need to be respectful. You want to keep your hands out. You don't need clenched fists. You don't want to cross your arms and look like you're this kind of angry, upset about the situation, because that, you may not realize it, but people feel what you kind of are expressing. And if you look like a shitty, mad person, they're going to feel that way.
There's a difference, right, between being assertive and aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And
And you can be assertive without being overly aggressive.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, because you're trying so hard to do one thing or another. There's a lot of discussion around, well, not a lot of discussion, but really they would recommend that you kind of just have one person communicating with the patient. You don't want to have like police talking one sentence and then your EMT partner who knows no offense to EMT partners, but let's say your EMT partner knows nothing about medicine and he's trying to convince this guy. That can be misleading, and it's really unfair to provide them with false information just to scare them into going. Um, you know, like I said, body language is extremely important. We should be active listening. Like we have 2 ears, one mouth. And then I think this is really important. It's the offering choices, but also making sure that you're setting limits and boundaries on what's going to be acceptable and what's not acceptable. Like you're not going to spit on me, okay? We're not going to do any spitting. If you spit, this is what's going to happen. We're going to pull the ambulance over. We're going to put a spit sock on you or whatever it is, right? And you're going to be restrained because you're not going to spit, you're not going to hit, you're not going to do that, and I'm going to respect you. And if they can't handle that, then that's probably not a patient for you at that point, right? I mean, you kind of figure out a different way of attacking that. Pardon the pun. Sorry.
Well done.
Right. Yeah. Just be respectful. I think Ken said it best. I think that's probably really, if one overarching goal when you're dealing with patients is respect them, right? If they don't respect you, then you can figure it out, but be respectful.
I agree. Be respectful. That's the top thing.
Yep.
From today's whole talk.
Yep.
Honestly.
100%.
Yeah. I'm clear.
I vote Cody.
Oh.
No. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, Aaron, thanks for coming on again. For those that don't know his Instagram, which if you're following us and you're not following him, you are doing something wrong. We share a lot of what he talks about, and he shares a lot of what we talk about, but you definitely need to be following him at thereal_PragMed.us. Shares a lot of great information, and he's always on top of any of the news that's going on in EMS. Once again, thanks for coming on. For everybody else out there, listeners, thank you for listening wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and be safe. See ya.
Thank you.